So this is a bit of an obsession that I have. Let's talk about it.
Dragon's Lair, a fantasy adventure where you become a valiant knight on a quest to rescue the fair princess from the clutches of an evil dragon. You control the actions of a daring adventurer finding his way through the castle of a dark wizard.
So my parents sent me this not too long ago. They found an actual token from the old arcade that I used to go to growing up, and it brought back an absolute ton of memories. I've wanted to do more arcade game content for a while now, and I figured what better way to start than with my all-time favorite game, and we're talking Dragon's Lair. A lot of people remember this game for being absolutely miserable to play. It cost too much money and you couldn't get anywhere in it. For me, I had a way different story. I was absolutely obsessed with this as a kid. I remember looking through magazines, and when I saw that this was coming out, I freaked out. For whatever reason, I've always been a huge animation fan. Like, I loved those movies, Robin Hood and Secret of Nim, and I didn't know that they were Don Bluth movies until I started seeing some of the magazine ads talking about Dragon's Lair and talking about the animator for these movies that I loved growing up was also doing the animation for this game. And Dragon's Lair came out when I was about 10 years old, but I had no place to play it. My dad, though, he worked in like Milwaukee-ish area, which was about 45 minutes to an hour from where I grew up. And I'm hoping I have this timeline right, but if I remember right, he actually stopped. It was called a Showbiz Pizza place in Milwaukee, which I don't know if that was local or national at the time, but it's be comparable to like your modern day Chuck E. Cheese, except it had real arcade games and not those stupid cheesy things that you waste your money and spend $1 to get 2 tickets to buy a spider ring. None of that. It was an actual legit arcade with arcade games. And if my memory serves me right, he actually kind of staked it out for us to see, and he noticed that they actually had Dragon's Lair. And he also knew that I had been obsessed with looking at magazines about it and things like that. So when he came home and told us that we were planning a trip and that I was going to actually be able to get in front of this cabinet, I was so excited. Like, I was having dreams about it. And I remember, though, the first time I played it, I was like everybody else, right? You put your 2 tokens in, and you just didn't get anywhere because it didn't control like a normal arcade game would. It was all quick time events, right? So you had to push right or left or a sword button at the right time to make Dirk do all these different things. So yeah, so my first visit was not the greatest with this game, but then I absolutely became obsessed. I was looking at every single magazine I could get my hand on that had any information about Dragon's Lair. And there were some, and I can't really even remember the magazines at this point, but there was a bunch of them that told you how to do certain levels. So I would study these, and we didn't get to go to Showbiz Pizza Place all that often. If we went like 2 or 3 times a year, maybe, that's what it felt like as a kid anyway. So I had a long time to wait in between play sessions and a long time to sit there and obsess over this game in a magazine opposed to actually playing it. But I got better, in the times that we went later. I started to get better. I could complete like 2, 3, 4 stages. Got to the point where I could finish probably close to half of the game, but then it all changed. They actually got it at my local arcade. And that's when the real obsession took place, because I would beg to go to the arcade multiple times a week. It never always worked out that way, but I went as much as I could and could play it much more often and really hone my skills. I can still remember the excitement when I walked into our local arcade and saw the cabinet there. I freaked out. I remember, and I think I still had to like stand on a stool to play the goofy thing. But yeah, I freaked out and was just, I went as, like I said, as much as I could to go and play this game. And from there wasn't as much as, looking at magazines to try and figure it out. It was more trial and error because I was able to sit in front of it for a lot longer than, I used to be able to. I remember we used to go, and they used to have like this early bird special where I don't know, you spend so much money, you get like an extra buck worth of tokens or something like that. And while all my friends would be running around spending all their tokens on every other arcade game in the place, I would literally just sit at Dragon's Lair and play it over and over and over again until I got to the point where I could finish it. And I actually have a really great memory too of finishing Dragon's Lair. I remember sitting there, and I think I was about 12 when I actually beat the game. And there was a much older, when you're a kid, felt like an adult, but could have been a 16-year-old for all I knew. I kept getting stuck at one of the very last pieces of the game when you're at the dragon, and he gave me a hint on how to get past the dragon. And yeah, so then I remember the first time I actually beat the dragon and won the game, it was just exhilarating. I mean, one of those feelings that you can't even really describe, especially as a kid. It was just so memorable. And I think that's why this game, with all those feelings I've had for this game over the years, I think that's why it still sits as my number one favorite game of all time. And by the time I got good at it and could complete the game with basically my 2 tokens that I walked in with, I would have a good majority of the arcade would be standing around watching me play it. And it was neat because nobody really, or a lot of people I should say, didn't know how to play this game whatsoever. And to sit there and watch this 12-year-old kid walk up to it and play it all the way through with maybe a death, sometimes I didn't die at all, to be able to get all the way through the game, was really cool, and it made me feel like a rock star. In fact, they did the whole thing where they put the second monitor on top of the arcade machine so people wouldn't crowd around the game so much. They could sit back and let people watch from afar. And I played that game until they no longer had it. Every time I went to the mall or happened to, even later in life when I was going to the mall to do Christmas shopping or something to that effect, I'd pass by the arcade and I'd pop in and play it. They didn't have it for too much longer because arcades were kind of starting to peter out a little bit there, and it was really kind of a bummer to see them go as more of the home consoles started becoming more popular. The arcades just kind of faded out. But my obsession did not stop with this game. I bought this game at every single console or handheld that I could, starting with my Atom computer, and that version of Dragon's Lair sucked. They did have a couple of the QuickTime event things, and I guess it was as close as you could possibly get at the time, but man, it was nowhere near the experience. Then after that, we ended up with an Amiga, and the Amiga version was actually pretty solid for the time. The whole thing was as much of a replica of the arcade as you could possibly get. They had to cut out a few scenes and, shorten some other ones, but yeah, it was a pretty decent port. But it wasn't until like the Sega CD hit, or even like, your regular PC stuff, that Dragon's Lair was actually in good hands and could almost completely replicate the arcade version. I still don't think anybody really got it right, because they did. For whatever reason, some of these ports, they changed some of the directions from the arcade, and even like added a stage, which was really weird. If you ever play the game and you have the stage where you walk across the moat and fall through, that's not the arcade version, that's the home version, because that moat, it's not in the actual arcade game. So yeah, I own this thing on pretty much everything. I own it for my Nintendo Switch, I have it on my phone, I think I had a Game Boy Color version of it, a Sega CD version of it, and I kept on playing. And when I found out that they were making a one-up arcade machine, I crossed my fingers and just hoped that they didn't screw this up, and then for one that it was the actual arcade version, and for two that it wasn't janky or didn't quite live up to my expectations, because it was the only way I was going to be able to capture that feeling of playing it on an arcade machine again. And before I got the one up, I did have a version of it for my II arcade machine, and it's that home version. And not only that, it's wonky because the screen size is different and it literally cuts off the bottom of the game. So I was a little depressed seeing that. It's not good. It's not the experience that I was hoping for. But I will say the one up machine is great. That if you're a Dragon's Lair fan, or if you want to try and experience the actual arcade feel of the game, it is a dead on port of the arcade machine. All the little quirks that were in there, as far as some of the shortening of some of the levels from the arcade, are on there perfectly. And the cabinet they do a terrific job with the speaker placement, the scoreboard, all that kind of stuff. It's not as tall as a regular arcade machine, but it really does bring that feeling home. And I was super thrilled when they came out with it. And I was even more thrilled when I put that thing all together and it actually was good and not a complete debacle. So yeah, Dragon's Lair is pretty much my gaming obsession. I still almost every day walk over to that cabinet behind me and get some playtime in. I just love it. It just brings back so many memories, so many feelings. I actually keep this token right by the marquee, so it feels just like back in the arcade where you hold your token, put your token to hold your place. One of those feelings that I absolutely love. I hope to be doing more arcade content because I have a lot of other games I'd like to talk about. I'd love to know what your memory of Dragon's Lair was. Did you play it? Did you like it? Did you hate it? Was it super frustrating? Let me know. I'd love to get some conversations going. And I plan on doing much more arcade content as well going forward. If you want to see a complete playthrough of Dragon's Lair, I did record one a while back, and I'll put it up here for you if I can find it. But let me know what you think. If you like what we're doing here, please consider liking, subscribing, all that other kind of fun YouTube stuff. Thanks for listening to me gush about my favorite game of all time, Dragon's Lair. We'll see you in the next video. Late.